purpose of his or her life is to discover it, and then to spend his or her years building upon that plot of ground it was given to him and to her to till.
Now, in the final volume of this remarkable collection of Earl Nightingale's thoughts, we'll have the opportunity to hear some of Earl's ideas on happiness. Surely there is no desire that frustrates human beings more than their yearning for happiness. Although Earl never claimed to have a prescription for making people happy, he was convinced that just as our self-esteem and attitudes are determined by our mind, happiness is also a product of our own thinking. When people say, "I just want to be happy," it's because they fail to realize that happiness is not an end in itself, nor is it the result of possessions or external events. It is only by forgetting ourselves that we release our energies and experience the satisfaction that comes with achievement. Let's listen now as Earl examines how other great thinkers have approached this subject.
Would you like to know how to be happy? Well, the answer, believe it or not, is known. You may already know it. It took one of the most brilliant minds ever to appear on the earth to come up with the answer. His name was John Stuart Mill, who lived from 1806 to 1873, became an outstanding philosopher and economist. He's believed to have had perhaps the highest IQ of any person who has ever lived. So unless you think you're smarter, pay attention. John Stuart Mill said, "Those only are happy who have their minds fixed on some object other than their own happiness. On the happiness of others, on the improvement of mankind, even on some art or pursuit, followed not as a means, but as itself an ideal end. Aiming thus at something else, they find happiness by the way." Okay, to my mind, there's no doubt whatever that is the true and only lasting path to lasting and meaningful happiness. The definition is so excellent, and people so often seem to be confused as to what happiness is all about. Let me repeat it. Those only are happy who have their minds fixed on some object other than their own happiness, on the happiness of others, on the improvement of mankind, even on some art or pursuit, followed not as a means, but as itself an ideal end. Aiming thus at something else, they find happiness by the way. I wonder why that isn't taught in school. I believe it's safe to say that not one person in 5,000 could give you an intelligent definition of what true happiness is all about. We must have our minds fixed on something other than happiness in order to find it. If we seek it directly, it will elude us forever. People say, "I want to be happy," as though it's something that can be done to them whether they do anything about it or not. Such people can never know happiness until they break out of the tiny world of themselves. Those only are happy who have their minds fixed on some object other than their own happiness. Therein lies the secret. The happiest people are usually the busiest people, almost always those whose business consists of serving others in some way. By losing themselves in what they're doing and where they're going, happiness quietly joins them and becomes a part of them. The miserable, unhappy people who cause such misery and unhappiness to others are the self-centered people, people who worry constantly about what they're getting out of it, rather than what they're giving. And the world is chock-a-bang full of them. Unfortunately, we see their harried, unhappy, furtive, ferret-like faces everywhere, pushing, their grasping hands extended. They fear life, they fear death, they're the pitiful caricatures of humanity, and they pay a terrible price for their ignorance. All right, no more mystery then as to what happiness is all about. If you're not happy, it's because you're not meeting John Stuart Mill's simple directions and definition. If you do qualify, you're a happy person. The thing I like about the definition, other than the fact that it's the best I've ever found, is that it places the responsibility for happiness directly where it belongs. Right smack on every one of us. We're responsible for our own happiness. We can't blame others. I was staying at a resort hotel, the Grand Hotel on Mackinac Island in northern Michigan. One evening after dinner, I settled myself comfortably in a chair on the porch that runs the entire length of the oak frame hotel. Supposedly, it's the longest porch in the world, just to relax and enjoy the delightful evening. There was a light breeze and a good moon. The lake was beautiful, and the lights of the passing ships could be seen. The evergreens stood out clearly in the moonlight, and it was altogether one of those really great times you remember. Before long, a young couple came strolling down the long porch. They were walking arm in arm, and I thought that they were all that was needed to make the picture complete. They walked slowly by me and then took seats not far away. They were silent for a moment, and I naturally thought that they were enjoying the remarkable beauty of the scene and the night as much as I was, when the young woman spoke. I know these were her exact words because I wrote them down as soon as I could stop laughing. She said, "I hate the smell of horses." There are no automobiles on Mackinac Island. All the transportation is done with horses, and they naturally lend their own unique flavoring to the island's atmosphere. I found it charming and a lot less irritating than the noise and fumes of cars, taxis, and trucks. But what made me laugh, of course, was that in the midst of all that beauty on one of the most beautiful evenings of the year, in so romantic and charming a setting, the only thing the young woman noticed that was worth mentioning was the faint odor of horses. They looked at me in surprise when I laughed, so I had to explain why, which neither of them found to be amusing at all. In fact, the young woman seemed somehow offended, and they soon moved away from the strange character who not only eavesdropped, but also laughed at them. The sad thing about it all was that the attractive young woman belongs to that vast army whose members make it their business to spend their lives focusing on the wrong things. I'll bet if the young man gave her a string of pearls, she'd busy herself with a minute inspection of the clasp. On a beautiful day, such people can spot that tiny cloud on the horizon. They don't appreciate the good qualities in people, but complain about their defects. If their children bring home report cards with 5 B's and 1 C, it's the C that'll get the comments and the attention. They don't look for what's right, but what's wrong. In a world of miracles and beauty, they see only horse droppings. If you mention this to them, they'll usually say you have your head in the sand, and they have it all backwards. There's nothing in the world that's perfect, and it's our job to eliminate as many defects as we can, but pity the poor people who go through life seeing only the fly specks on the window of the world. We speak of recreation without being mindful of its original meaning, its real meaning, which is to recreate oneself. Recreation should be recreation, a time so spent that we can reevaluate things, our lives, our work, our goals, our reasons for living, our service, our contribution, our education, our hobbies, our enjoyment of ourselves and others. A round of golf, great as it is, simply is not time enough. Nor are a few sets of tennis or an afternoon poking around in the garden. We need more time than that. Several days, a couple of weeks or longer, and on a regular basis. For me, it's getting on the water in a boat. It's wearing comfortable old clothes and sailing out of sight of land with just the sea and the wind and the sky. And it's puttering and fixing things around the boat, sanding and varnishing and making little improvements. There's the therapy of the fresh air, the sea itself, the elements, and it's using your 2 hands, the most versatile instruments on earth, and the tools they've fashioned to help. Everyone has his own way, or should have his own way, of recreating himself, of renewing himself, so that he can turn again to the necessary pursuits of living with new interest and enthusiasm. What's yours? With one friend of mine, it's growing tomatoes. For others, it's painting or cooking or mountain climbing or fishing or camping or traveling. Everyone needs recreation in its true sense. Robert Ardrey points out in his marvelous book, The Social Contract, that the 3 most important factors to any human being are, in this order: number 1, identity, recognition as a separate, original human being; number 2, stimulation, change, the opposite of boredom; and number 3, security, the opposite of anxiety. Well, this recreation business comes under headings 1 and 2, and most certainly helps us establish number 3. That is, occasional renewal helps us find ourselves, reestablish just who we are and what we want. So it helps with our identity problem. It most certainly involves change, stimulation, the opposite of boredom. And it helps us develop inner security, the only kind that's worth anything anyway. If a person has this inner security, real security as a person, his world can come crashing down all around him, and he can still emerge secure within himself and build a new and possibly better one. So when you find yourself getting stale, you need some meaningful recreation. You need to stop the world and get off for a while and look back at it as a man from Mars might. It's surprising the new ideas you'll get, and good ones, the new opportunities you'll see. Opportunities that have been lying about in your own backyard, in your own working world, that you were a little too close to the forest to see before. And when you're lost in the recreation you love, you're really living. You're living as fully as it's possible to live.